Welcome to Refreshments with Robin. I'm Robin Feathers, your host, and today we've got a great show. You do not want to miss it. We'll be right back in just a second. Hi, my name is Robin Feathers, co-owner of Featherly Guitars and FA Amplification. I've been involved in the music business for a really long time, and I've played a few shows, little bass, little guitar, some keyboards and drums on a rare occasion. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, I did 20 years active duty in the United States Navy, most of it aboard aircraft carriers, and saw some really cool places around the world. Over the years, I've built some really cool musical gear. Some guitars, some basses, some amplifiers, a few pedals, and some other odd musical instruments. At least people tell me that the stuff I'm building is cool. Now, it's just therapy for me. My friend Chris Lewis and I are building a guitar shop where we're planning on building some really high-end musical equipment. And we're doing it just because we love doing it. Most importantly, I've made a lot of really good friends along the way. So here's my chance to show you how really cool they are in a series where we just sit around and we have a relaxed beverage and a conversation. I call it Refreshments with Robin. All right, welcome back. Today we have a special guest with us. This is Jimmy Keegan. Drummer extraordinaire, is actually the drummer for one of my favorite bands, Spock's Beard, and Pattern Seeking Animals, who I'm just starting to get into. Great band. But welcome to the show. Great to have you on board with us today, Jimmy.
Thank you so much.
First question, what's the beverage today?
Simple, orange juice. Still, okay. Well, it's technically not morning anymore, but it's orange juice for me.
Yep. Strawberry lemonade today.
Oh, fun.
So again, this is just a relaxed conversation between a couple people that, like I say, people I highly respect in the music business. Got like a million questions for you about Spock's Beard, but I want to find out first, what are you doing lately are you doing anything other than Pattern Seeking Animals right now?
Yeah, well, as I just mentioned before we came on here, I just released a solo album in March. So that's been a bit of my focus. I mean, besides I have work that I do, a few different bands that do various kinds of gigs. And
from what I've seen, you're actually very busy doing a lot of studio work, and then you're a member of a couple of different bands. So where do you have time for Jimmy?
That's kind of been the task.
Yeah.
I literally am in a situation where I'm supposed to mail out a series of signed items and whatnot, and I'm trying to find a minute to actually do it. Yeah. And it's proving to be a bit of a task.
Yeah.
But it will be done all the same. But yeah, I run sessions out of the house. I mean, you can see the kit behind me.
Yep.
It's not mic'd up at the moment because I was building it for something else.
Yeah.
And then I do, sessions at studios as well.
Now you're endorsed by, what is it, Yamaha?
Drums? I endorse Yamaha, Sabian, Aquarian drum heads, Audio Technica microphones.
Several of my favorites. I was a drummer for a while, but I have worked on aircraft carriers for 20 years, so I have tinnitus, so I gave up the drumming. But I was actually a Tama guy, but I played Aquarian heads, Vic Firth sticks, Sabian cymbals, the whole kabang.
I've been Vader for quite a while. I actually played Tama drums up until 10 years ago. This is actually my 10th anniversary with Yamaha.
Nice.
Speaking
of which,
manufacturers.
The first year you were with Yamaha, you were out at the NAMM show in Anaheim, and I remember I was walking through there and I saw this little glass booth with a guy sitting in there with this totally trapped animal look on his face, playing the drums, and I walked by and I'm like, hey, hi, can you want a water or anything? And I felt so bad for you, locked up in that little booth there.
Oh, that was Aquarian.
Oh, was it? Okay, yeah.
Aquarian had a booth that year. I think they were testing. They had a drumhead idea that kind of never really got off the ground. It sort of works, but it's a drumhead that contains a trigger element in it.
Oh, nice.
I've got the prototype over here.
Yeah.
It's a great idea, except it only works under high tension. So it works on snare drums, smaller toms.
Yeah.
But when you put it on the rack toms, the heads are more likely to flutter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because we tune, most people tune.
Yeah. So you get all kinds of weird false triggering.
Yeah, you get kind of.
Yeah.
So on the snare drum, it worked great, actually. to be honest, it was actually quite impressive on the snare drum.
Yeah.
But then the other issue that you ran into is in order to make it work, the drum head had to be very thick.
Yeah.
So you run into this. There's so much give and take in the whole process of it all that at some point you're just like, okay, I'll just get a trigger.
Yeah.
And then I can have the drum head I want. And so the idea, while it was a novel idea, and maybe with a little more effort, it probably could have, and money that I don't think Aquarian was willing to dump into it, it probably could have taken off. But that's what we were demoing that day.
Okay. What's the favorite? What is your favorite part of your career?
My favorite part of my career. My favorite part of my career is the phone can ring at any moment.
Yeah.
And everything changes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For instance, I had a buddy of mine. I called a buddy of mine over. He made a cable for me. My studio here is big enough to do rehearsals, so I've been meaning to get some of the bands that I work with to just come here and rehearse instead of spending money at a rehearsal place.
Right.
So I finally had my studio wired up to facilitate that. So this friend of mine builds cables. He built me a custom cable to allow multiple headphone outputs with unique mixes.
Yeah.
And he came over and we chatted for a little while and we played some music and, hung out as friends do. And he says, well, I got to take off. I got an early thing tomorrow. I'm checking. He's doing sound for St. Vincent.
Okay. Yeah.
But in the process of it all, he mentioned a mutual guitar player friend. He also does front of house for the band ABC.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, say hi to Toshi when you see him. And I said, hey, if you ever hear anything about that band, needing a drummer and everything, because I know they do a lot of just one-off gigs, like weekend type stuff.
Yeah. Wasn't ABC supposed to go out on a tour with Primus and Coheed and Cambria?
Not ABC. It's going to be Howard Jones and Haircut 100. I can't imagine ABC being with those guys.
I thought I saw something about that earlier today. I know that they actually changed it. Puddle's Pity Party is now going to be opening for him, which is going to be interesting.
That might be a little more quirky, but yet still
primacy. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
But
Sorry.
anyway, so I mentioned that I was interested in, if they ever needed somebody to, fill in on that chair, I'd be, because I always liked the band ABC. I'm a big Trevor Horn fan.
Yeah.
And 3 days later, I got a phone call saying, are you serious about this? Would you actually be interested in doing this gig? And I said, sure, why not? I mean, schedules line up and, everything else works out right. I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
It turns out starting in August, they're going out for a 4-week tour with Howard Jones and Haircut 100, and I'll be playing drums.
Nice.
So just like that, I went from one thing to now I'm doing this.
Yeah. Speaking of doing one thing and going to another thing completely, you started out, I read earlier in career, you did some stuff with Disney, right?
I've done about everything you can do with Disney except on the corporate, executive side.
Yeah.
I've done television with Disney as an actor.
You were a Mouseketeer?
I was not a Mouseketeer.
Okay.
I did it when Disney first started what used to be the Disney Channel, what eventually became the cable channel.
Yeah.
When the Disney Channel first started, I got cast to be in a TV show, and it was supposed to be sort of the flagship show of the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they could never get the special effects to actually work.
Right.
So we shot a lot of the physical footage, without the special effects. Mm-hmm. And then for another 3 months, we basically just went to school on the set.
Yeah.
And then they finally gave up and shut us down.
Yeah.
But I've been an actor for Disney. I've been a musician for Disney, both in both parks, as well as I've played sessions for their fireworks shows.
Yeah. Oh, their fireworks shows are amazing. They are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah. And the one I did was for their Disney World's 50th anniversary. Yeah. They did they project video on the castle and then do a fireworks show over that. So I did some of the music for that.
Yeah. Now I haven't actually been to a Disney park in quite a while. I moved out to Virginia in '94 and haven't really had an opportunity to go back to one, but I grew up in Southern California.
Right.
San Bernardino. And I used to go to Disneyland every year. And I remember we're talking way, way back in the days when it was either free or like $10 to get into the park, but you had the tickets. You had the A
Yeah.
ticket, the B ticket, etc. So
Right.
we used to go all the time back then. One of the coolest shows that I ever saw was I went out there and they were playing Spyro Gyro was on Tom Sawyer Island. So there was a huge crowd around the island there. And, I wasn't really into that kind of stuff back in the day. And I got smart later in life, thank you. But I would turned around and right behind that is Haunted Mansion and
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean. And we're walking right up onto, you just walk in the door and get on the ride and go.
Yeah.
So we were doing that kind of stuff. And of course, I did see a little bit of Spyro Gyra because, I was becoming to like that kind of stuff. So the question that I have is, sorry, you're going to say something?
I was going to say that would have been like early 80s.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I started playing at Disneyland in 85.
Yeah. So what was the career path to go from Disney to Spock's beard? That's a kind of a drastic change there. How did that come about?
Well, so Disney originally, the band that played at Disneyland was called Polo, and it was originally an original band.
Yeah.
Our intention was to, write our own songs. We were all teenage kids.
Yeah.
Write our own songs and, make records and do what everyone else imagines. Somewhere in it all, we got an opportunity to play at Knott's Berry Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, well, that could be an interesting way to gather fans.
Yeah.
So the deal we made with Knott's Berry Farm is, can we play our own material? And they're like, yeah, you can play whatever you want. So we played our own material and decided we needed more additional because we had to play multiple sets. So we started playing cover songs and scattered our material throughout all of that. And exactly what we tried to do worked. We started getting young teenage girl fans and whatnot. And then the buzz started building up to where Stan Freeze, father of Josh and Jason Freeze, he was the booking agent for Disney. He came over and saw us at Knott's, brought us over to Disney. So for the first year at Disney, it was originally a 5-piece band, and I was the only drummer. And a year in, we decided to bring Josh into the band. So we had 2 drummers, and then we started building this following to where we could do. We made a couple of records. We did some shows in and around LA, a little bit of traveling, some TV shows. We did Star Search, things like that.
Yeah.
And then we all realized, in particular, the guitar player and I had known each other since I was 10, and now we were 17, 18 years old. We kind of grew up and sort of grew apart, and I left the band, and then the band just stopped playing. But in the process, we started getting to know various engineers, and as we were tracking, Josh started doing sessions. I started doing sessions. The guitar player, Mike, started doing sessions, both as a guitar player, but also as a technician. He became an engineer. Yep. He now owns a studio in Norway, one of the biggest studios in all of Europe. But the other thing is we ended up playing cover songs. Well, in the process of playing cover songs, other bands saw us play and were like, well, they can do anything. So when Polo broke up, whenever any of the other bands would need a sub, I would fill in and start doing cover songs.
Yeah.
From doing cover songs, that would lead to doing other bands outside of Disney. Okay, well, that started paying my bills. Mm-hmm. But in the process, you also need to have subs for whatever you're doing because you get a tour or you get a weekend gig where you have to travel and you need a sub. I sang, so I needed a sub drummer. Mm-hmm. And the only guy in town that I knew of that could sing really well and play really well was Nick DiVirgilio.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, I knew of Nick and Spock's Beard. I hadn't heard them, but I knew, because I'd see him in Modern Drummer every once in a while, and I just knew him from around town. He was just a name. You kind of get to know the names, and who's the guy? Oh, he's the guy. Mm-hmm. So when I heard that Neil had left Spock's Beard and that he was going to become the singer, I started sending him messages because we'd actually never even met face to face. Yeah, I would call him and send him things saying, "Hey, you want to fill in for me?" Sure, great. And vice versa. I'd fill in for him, but we never physically met.
Right.
And
that was around 2002, right?
Yeah, this would have been over the first few years of the 2000s. And then I became, when that album came out and they decided to go on the road, he wanted to be the singer. He decided to go up front and sing. I became the Chester Thompson. and he asked me if I'd join as a touring guy. So I was a touring guy for 9 or 10 years. Mm. But that's really it. It's just a matter of we were cover drummers trying to stay alive in LA and, and pay our bills. Yeah. And when you do something that's a little different than everybody else, you have to find somebody that can do that thing. And Nick was the other guy. Yeah. And I was that for him.
You were primarily the live drummer for the band for quite a few years before you actually joined and became the drummer.
Right.
Were you involved in any of the studio stuff with them at all, or was it just you?
I did vocals on the X album on 10.
Yeah.
And
it's a great album, by the way.
Yeah, that was a really, when I started hearing for the recordings to do the vocals, I was like, hey guys, this is really great. But I also knew that Nick had just got the gig with Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I knew that kind of posed a problem. And the part of the reason I was doing background vocals is he'd already left.
Yeah.
So they needed somebody. They changed some of the songs a little bit, and it changed the melodies a bit. And they didn't want to really lean on auto-tune.
Yeah.
So they tried auto-tuning, and then they would have me sort of duplicate it. And then it just got to the point where like, well, why don't I just recut it? Mm-hmm. So most of the background vocals, for about 2/3 of the album, most of the background vocals are me.
Yeah.
Or they're a combination of me and Nick.
Right.
And then the rest of it's the band. And then the other guys also chimed in a bit as well.
Yeah.
So, and that's at that same point, we started getting offers for some festivals, and we did the festivals. And then Nick couldn't do the festival. So we asked him if he'd mind if we just took Ted and Ted Leonard to be the singer, and I would play drums. And at that point, the writing was kind of on the, we kind of saw what was coming.
Now, one of my favorite videos that I've seen recently is where pretty much all of the members from the beginning of time got together and did
the Snow album,
full version of Snow, and that was just freaking amazing. First of all, Snow is an extremely let me back up. 2005, I'm playing in a hardcore metal band out in Virginia Beach, and the drummer of the band introduces me to Spock's Beard. He hands me the record Snow, and I listened. I didn't give it back to him for like 2 years. I just hang on to the thing. But Snow has very firmly placed itself in the top 5 of all-time great prog records, because it's just such a phenomenal record from end to end. It's just so amazing. So one question that I have to ask you about that live concert is, by the way, very, very, very good show, everything. How did you get roped into doing Freak Boy? I mean, good performance, but I mean, why did they stick you in Freak Boy for that?
You know what? When it came to the vocals, it was kind of a strange thing. I had sang the one song on Oblivion Particle, which wasn't even meant to happen. Ted had done a pass of it, and I heard it an entirely different way than the way Ted sang it. So I went in. We received his track, track while I was in finishing up drums on another song.
Yeah.
So we dropped it in the track and we listened to it, and Ted's brilliant. It wasn't a matter of was a great singer. It's just I didn't think it was the right intent.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be easier than getting on the phone and try to explain. Let me just record part of it, and I'll show you. This is more how I'm hearing this character. And so I started recording it. Well, before I knew it, we just decided to track the whole thing. But again, it wasn't with the intent of this is the final vocal. This is just to kind of give him a guide.
Yeah.
Because I heard something very specific, and it wasn't what Ted heard.
Yeah.
And so we tracked my vocal and sent that off to Ted with that note saying, just think of it as a guide and just hear it as intent, and then do your version of this, make that your own, but try it from this perspective. And then I walked away from it. I didn't think anything of it and thought he'll track a vocal and it'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the record came out and my vocal was on it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even until like right before I got a finished copy, I started hearing mixes, and I kept hearing my vocal, and I kept sending notes going, yeah, but where's Ted's vocal? Where's Ted's vocal? And no one would respond.
Yeah.
So apparently they had a conversation. Ted got the vocal and sent the message back to John, who wrote the song, and said, "That's it. I'm not going to fix that. I think that's what the vocal should be."
Yeah, yeah.
So
On the subject of John, John and weren't you and John the first two members of Pattern Seeking Animals?
you could say that. Yeah, it was originally supposed to be. It was originally supposed to be something else. He came to me just in conversation, said, "Hey, I've been talking about doing an album."
Yeah.
Inside Out had approached him about the concept of doing an album based around his material.
Right.
But he was like, "Well, I'm not really a player in that regard. The way I program and work is a bit different."
Right.
And he goes, "I'm not going to," he said, and I already heard his demos, so I know what his voice was like. He's like, "I'm not going to sing anything."
Yeah.
But he said, "Would you be interested in playing some drums on it?" Like, yeah, sure. That would be great. The original plan was to do like a kind of a mishmash of John would be sort of an Alan Parsons thing where he would be the center focus, the songwriter producer.
Yeah.
And the band would be just whoever we thought sounded good.
Yeah.
And so in the process of talking about it, I became kind of also just not a co-producer in the sense, more like a co-producer like on a television show.
Right.
In the sense of like, who do you think would sound good in this? Well, maybe we could put Marco Miniman on this, or maybe we could put Thomas Lang on it. Various other drummers. Get so and so to play drums in this. Get Andy Edwards to play drums in this. And we had all these guys in mind, and bass players and guitar players and whatnot. And that was the intent. That with each song, as we heard the song in the demo, this is really kind of sensitive. Maybe the vocalist can be so and so. And he said, "Well, I know I want the first couple of songs to be you, Dave, and Ted, because I think you're a great rhythm section, and I want to hear Ted playing guitar, because he doesn't really get a chance to play a lot of guitar."
Yeah.
And so he approached Ted about playing guitar on it.
Yeah.
And then in that, he's like, "Well, why don't you sing it as well?" So the first 3 songs were cut with us as a rhythm section, and we kind of went, "This is pretty good." Yeah. and in that, once we kind of heard relatively finished versions of those songs, John changed his mind. He goes, "You know what? I want to just keep tracking with this band."
Yeah.
So then we thought, well, maybe we'll do this band for their first record, and then your next record will be a different rhythm section and a different. And he's like, "Yeah, we'll see." So we finished the whole album, and it became a band.
So John is really more on the studio side, whereas live you have Walton Dennis, is correct?
Yeah, he played live back when he was younger, but over the years he kind of pulled away from being a live performer.
Yeah.
And now he just doesn't have any desire whatsoever to, his reasons and other people's reasons. He just doesn't want to do it. It's just as simple as that. He's like, I don't, not my thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've only done a few live shows anyway. I think we're supposed to be on the next cruise. We've had some conversations about that, but Walter and Dennis will be the live guys.
On the subject of touring, oh shoot, I forget how long ago it was. I think it was probably about 6 years ago now. I had one opportunity to see Spock's Beard up in the Washington, D.C. area, and unfortunately I missed that show because of timing, and I've been waiting for the band to come back out here. I don't know about anybody else, but I will say that me and my business partner, Chris, we love prog, and we want some prog bands out here on the East Coast, specifically Virginia, in the Hampton, Newport News, Virginia Beach area. Will you guys please come out here?
Well, I'm not in Spock's Beard anymore.
Yeah. I mean, like Pattern Seeking Animals.
Pattern Seeking Animals.
Bands, yeah.
Man, if I could get anyone to book Pattern Seeking Animals, we'll go anywhere.
Okay.
The challenge we've had with that is cost, and I mean, just
like I say, in general, it's kind of hard to get any prog bands out here. I mean, a while back, my son is really big into some of the more modern stuff. We went to up into a club in Richmond, and we saw Thank You Scientist and Hawken. And that was just Haken. Yeah, sorry. That was a really, really good show. But other than that, this area just doesn't get a whole lot of prog. It's mostly like, we're considered in the South, so we get a lot of that kind of stuff around here. But we were, like I say, I'm a prog guy from way back. My first experience into Prague was my buddy Rick back in 1976 came over to my house and we dropped the needle on 2112, and I've just been hooked ever since. So,
Right,
you
right.
know, but yeah, there's a lack of presence of it in this area, and I would love to see,
The,
if
the
you have any
challenge
pull
of
in that
it,
area.
yeah, the challenge of it is the audiences just aren't.
Yeah,
Just touring the United States in general is a challenge because there's vast areas of nothing,
yeah,
or just farms.
yeah,
So like as you're traveling through Kansas and Oklahoma and parts of Texas and whatnot, the Midwest and all that, there's just nothing there.
yeah,
And so the idea of taking a band that's going to draw maybe 300, between 300 and 1,000 people,
yeah. That's got to be really tough.
at smaller venues 200, at larger venues 1,000.
Yeah,
It's a matter of finding those venues, and it's a matter of finding those venues that are close enough but far enough.
yeah,
Because when you get into those areas that are a little more that have a smaller population, they're going to travel further.
yeah,
So like if when you look at the East Coast, you have the whole New England area where everything's dense.
yeah,
And then as you start getting further south, it's not as dense. The coastal areas are. So where you are, all the way down through Florida is fine. But as you travel west,
yeah,
you get into the Appalachians and the farming and everything like that. And it's a day of driving before you get to the next place where
yep,
you can play.
yeah,
Well, that costs money.
yeah,
And it just gets to the point where getting 200 people at a venue isn't going to pay the bill to get you from say somewhere in like I said, Virginia up to Ohio,
yeah,
and then from Ohio, down to Nebraska.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's just there's too much distance. So it means you're kind of stuck to traveling and playing only in the New England area and California coast.
yeah.
Maybe up into Washington,
Mm-hmm.
It's the only place that you can get venues close enough that will draw enough people and a dense enough population where you'll get enough people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that creates this thing where unless you're a band that's got a following of a particular size, like Haken, and Haken's about as small as you can go.
Yeah.
And Haken, like here in LA, they played the Roxy.
Yeah.
Which is only like 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
They could probably play, I think the last time they were here, they played a larger venue.
Yeah.
And they're still growing. I mean, they're getting a bigger and bigger following, but they're still playing 600 to 1,000 seaters. If they get a band that's big enough, they might get a draw between the two bands and get somewhere like 1,500. But that's barely making enough money to do a tour of the U.S.
Yeah.
And a band like Pattern Seeking Animals doesn't have the following yet.
Right. I've never really been in a band myself that has been able to do any kind of a national tour. With a band I was in Virginia Beach 4 years ago, we did a tour around this area, but it was always within, a couple hours worth of drive. So I can't even imagine the logistics needed for traveling a band across the country like that. But
yeah, like even Spock's. I did one tour with Spock's up in the New England area where we played like 8 or 9 dates.
Yeah,
and the biggest problem we run into is that like I said, the venues are just so close to one another that, we'd play in Boston, then New York, and then Connecticut. It's the same 300 people.
Yeah.
In all three venues.
Yeah.
There's a variable of like 20, 25 people in each place, but otherwise it's the same people coming to all shows, which is fine. I mean, I don't mind the idea of the same people coming to shows. It's just if you're playing, why travel?
Yeah.
Just play the same place 3 nights in a row.
Yeah, exactly.
And then save your money, and but it's that. It's just, just run to the thing. So Europe is always the better choice because it's denser population, closer, but far enough away.
And
even
Europe
in Europe, we get
also
repeats.
has a much larger group of people that like prog as well.
Because they teach music in school automatically.
Yeah, definitely.
So
question is, actually, let me back up for just a second. I wanted to kind of sing John's praises here real quick. Absolute genius in action was when he put the song Their Names Escape Me together as a tribute to
Right.
the people that funded the record That was just absolutely amazing. And that's one of those things where, I listen to that song and I hear all those names going on there. Why couldn't I have heard about that before it happened? But just absolute genius for him to put out that kind of care and thought into thanking all those people publicly like that. It was just, if you see John, just tell him I think that was just freaking genius.
Oh, it's one of my favorite things too. Yeah.
And I can't even imagine what that would have been like for Nick to sing that song live, trying to, have a big chart in front of you with all the names on it, just reading the names. But
we talked about it. We did talk about it, but we didn't.
I heard that there was actually some talk about doing it, but Nick's like, I don't know.
Well, we talked about, because there's a version of the song without the names, and then there's a version of the song with the names, and we talked about doing it because the song in itself is a great song.
Yeah, it is.
So this is how small the world is.
Yeah.
Marillion was the first to do crowdsourcing, right? So Marillion does crowdsourcing and kind of begins the whole idea of what crowdsourcing is.
Right.
I don't know if people realize that, but that's where the concept of crowdsourcing starts.
Yeah.
Period. GoFundMe, Indiegogo, any of these things, it all starts with the idea of Marillion had this weird idea, and it wasn't even them; it was the fans that came up with the concept on their chat boards. So they'd started doing it, and I'd heard something about it, and then a friend of mine, Josh Freese, who I mentioned earlier, who's now the drummer of the Foo Fighters and various other things. So he was still kind of doing sessions and touring with a few little bands. And he put an album together, and he decided to put out this album. And his crowdsourcing idea was nonsense. There's no way any of it would work, except to his surprise, he sold almost everything. Some of the things that he offered were things like, it starts simple, like, get a download.
Yeah.
$8 for the download, $10 gets you the CD, or $12, whatever, it gets you the CD. And then it starts to progressively get up until you get into the thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to join me and Maynard James Keenan in Danny Carey's Ferrari we'll go down to Tijuana and we'll show you what for. And that's all it said.
Yeah.
That was the thing you'd buy.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, those cars only fit two people.
Yeah.
So
I'll just ride in the luggage rack.
It turns out he put one available, and someone bought it. It was like $10,000, and someone bought it.
Wow.
So he was in this problem of, he had all these really somewhat, not even impossible, but it's like he realized, oh shit, now I've got to call Maynard James Keenan and Danny Carey and say, by the way, guys, I obligated you, and someone bought it.
Yeah.
But I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was a genius way, the idea of it. I thought it was, but the fact that he used humor, because if you know him, then you realize, well, he's a nutty guy. I mean, he has a really fascinating sense of humor, and it was a great way to sell himself.
Yeah.
So I went to the guys and said, hey, and again, I was only the touring guy for X. I showed them that. I said, you saw what Marillion did. This is what my buddy did. What if we did something in between that showed our personalities and see if we can crowdfund instead of relying on a record company in which we got to pay all the money back.
Right.
And they decided to go with it. So that first album, so the X album was crowdfunded. And then that's where the idea of, you could figure out a way to thank all the people that do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was John's idea or if it was Nick's idea, but I think probably John came up with the idea. The song, no, it was John's song. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's all his idea, but it was all based on the idea that we had conversations about. There's ways that you can incorporate. Don't just tell the fans to give you money.
Yeah.
Get them involved.
Yeah.
Do things that make them, come to you. Come sit in the studio with us while we track.
Yeah.
Come to a sound check or something. Do all these things that make it interactive, where it's not just I'm buying this record.
Yeah.
Let them buy an experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where all that came out of. And
so who are some people in the music business that you respect? And for anybody up and coming in the music business, how would you offer them encouragement?
Who are people in the music business that I respect? Wow. I mean, there's musicians for days that I could talk about. I've recently
It's
got
I was going
I've
to
recently
say
got to know
working
Pat
with
Mastelotto.
uh,
I met him a few years ago, but it's only in the last couple of years that we've kind of run into each other on festivals and crews and stuff like that, where we've actually had the time to sit and chat.
mhm.
And I am utterly impressed. I mean, not just his playing. I mean, his playing is genius, but he has such a sweet disposition about him. And when you talk to him, he looks like he's looking at, it's like staring into your soul. He's so interested in what you have to say. He wants to know. When he asks you a question, he means it.
Yeah.
He really wants to know the answer of what, the question.
Right.
When he talks about drumming and music and everything like that, you can see that it's everything about him. So I've been really enjoying any little chance I get to hang out with him.
Yeah.
For those, all those reasons, anytime you get to hang out with a nice person, but especially someone that you admire artistically and, personally, it's, who else? I mean, you mentioned Haken. All those guys are just the nicest guys.
Yeah.
I've had, Spock's did a couple of shows with him in Canada. And then from there, we've just, again, we were saying, we run into him on, festivals and everything like that.
Yeah. Nicest
guys you could imagine. Insanely talented. I think as I've gotten older, the part that I look for more than even talent and everything is what kind of person are they?
Yeah.
So when I find musicians or producers or whatever they are that impress me with with who they are as a person, that gets my attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
our 40 minutes are almost up. Jimmy, I want to thank you so much for joining me. This has been a great conversation. I would love to have another opportunity to get together and talk with you at a later date if you're available for it.
Sure.
Like I say, great having you on here. This is only the second show that we've done like this, so I'm just very grateful to you for taking the time to come on and talk to me. And I wish you all the best. And I will definitely be listening for more from you. And for the people who follow me, Pattern Seeking Animals, you need to check those out. JimmyKeegan.com. Go check him out. Great guy. Thank you very much, Jimmy. I appreciate your time.
Cheers. See you soon.
All right.